Okay, so Hélène Valance is a specialist of late 19th and early 20th century French and US visual culture, currently leading a 4-year research program on French 19th century games, board games, puzzles, paper theaters, and lottos mainly at Institut National d'Histoire de l'Art in Paris. She's also working on a manuscript on representations of national history in US games in the long 19th century. So please take it away. I'm really excited to hear your talk.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Walter. I'm very excited to be here and very much looking forward to all of your feedback. Thank you, everyone who's showed up online tonight. And the way I wanted to shape it, this talk tonight, is to just give you a short presentation of the program, this 4-year program that I'm leading at Institut National d'Histoire de l'Art. Having in mind the idea that I'm always looking for collaborations and ideas from various angles. So I'm really looking forward to your remarks at the end of this short presentation. So the program is entitled Histoire en jeu, playing with history if you want. And as Walter said, it examines representations of history in games and toys marketed in France during the long 19th century. I mentioned that in the title, and Walter mentioned it also, that I also work on a manuscript right now on 19th century US games because as by training, I'm an Americanist. But for tonight, I'm just going to focus on the French games. I think there's enough material for that. And so I'm looking at the way history is taught through games in a long 19th century. And by games, I mean playing cards from the French Revolution to propaganda relating to the First World War, for instance. So those are my end dates, 1789 to the early 1920s, let's say. So the follow-up of the First World War. And so the idea is to look at the way images of history are disseminated through those various playful formats. And you see two examples there already. There's a very rich diversity within the corpus about games. You can see already first that, can you hear me? You can already see from those two examples, like the card games from the French Revolution or the aftermath of the French Revolution, and the First World War game, that those are not only directed at children. They are mainly considered, images that were living in an ecosystem of images and images of history, relatively recent history sometimes. And so the question I'm asking is how those images of history, those playful images of history, help the discourses on history be transmitted, but also assimilated, and also recomposed or reinterpreted at some points. And so what I focus mainly on games that are oops, sorry. I've lost you for a second. One of the questions also is, what does it mean to play with history, and to consider those two things that do not seem to be to work very well together. First, the historical facts, and then the play and the question of, making chains and freedom of play enter this realm of historical discourse. And I'm looking at the way also the kind of children's culture, material culture of history, and how those, very popular, or we talk about popular history, but how those discourses about history are developed through those images that are not necessarily the completely in adhesion with the formal educative discourses of the time. So I'm looking, I was saying, at a great variety of games. What you see also across the period from the French Revolution to the First World War, you see a very a great disparity between the images you see on, for instance, the cards from Etienne Jouy, which is very, there's a lot of text and not very much imagery, and this is a very austere game, to the more spectacular staging of history through those paper theaters that are, considered like they were part of the very artsy collection of this game maker Saucine. You probably heard of them if you studied 19th century games. So you have, already a very big variety of games in terms of how much fun they are compared to how much knowledge they convey. But you also have a great variety of formats. For instance, you have games that are not just games, but that can also be considered toys. I'm showing you the picture of a Loto that was initially made in Germany, but commercialized in France. And as you would play the Loto and pull the numbers, you would peg the numbers in the form of the little sailors in those little boats. So, of course, the distinction between games and toys is never fully clear. Although really what I'm saying over and over when I explain my project to people is I don't look at toys that much. I don't look at soldiers and things like that, because when you talk about history, there's a lot of toys already on that topic. I look more specifically at games, but games and toys are sometimes two notions that overlap. Same for here. The variety is also between the very expensive games and the cheaper games that you can find. So I have like those paper constructions. The first one is of the visit of Queen Victoria, and the second one is a plate from Pellerin, the printer in Épinal, and you can reenact the various episodes of the life of Joan of Arc, and this type of games, I'm still considering them borderline games and toys. This type of imagery about history is very easily accessible to a very wide audience because it's very cheap. But in reality, also I'm looking at games that are fairly expensive. They're beautiful, but they remain in the hands of the children of the bourgeoisie, basically. I'm also looking at this type of formats, and just to show you also the diversity. I mean, this is really clearly a very expensive game. It's about this size, and the idea is really the common denominator between all those games is that there is a printed image. I'm looking at images, really. I'm working at an art history institute. So the common factor between all of those games is that they are, like, in one way or another, image-based, let's say it that way. The partnerships I've been establishing through this program are with several museums that have like large collections of games. The MUNEI is the Musée National de l'Éducation, the National Education Museum. The Toy Museum, which also has games. Some public libraries, especially in Paris, Bibliothèque Forney, Bibliothèque historique de la Ville de Paris. MUSEM, which was, holds collections about, domestic everyday life, and so they have a large fund of a large collection of games as well. And then there's also the Fonds patrimonial du jeu de société, and I wanted to mention it because those are colleagues I work in close collaboration with, and if you don't know already their project, you'd be interested in what they're doing. I'm also looking at private collections. Mostly, this is at least half of the corpus of the program. And I'm showing you a picture of a collection, a private collection, held by someone whose name is Alain Rabussier, and who also has a blog, which is very interesting. And we've been establishing together, working on program for a project for a database. So the idea is that this private collection that I was showing you, like the boxes you've been seeing, the collector has been digitizing all of his objects. It's over 3,000 games. And the idea, one of the main outcomes of the project so far is going to be to digitize everything. So this private collection, but also segments of collections across public institutions, and to create a database that will be searchable and that will not be entirely focused on games about history, about national history. And the idea is to make those games available to researchers like you, and coming in from different angles. There's a lot of games on travel, for instance, or literature. So the idea is to make those images and those objects available to a very wide audience. Also, I think it's going to be an interesting and resource for collectors or museums as well. And it will also, on top of objects, include archives. What you're seeing here on the screen are archives from Vatillo, who was a prominent 19th century game maker. So you're looking at a draft for the rules of the game. And on the right, you're looking at the cover from an album that's been digitized very recently by the Musée du Jouet in Poissy, that collects prints and work in progress from Saucine. And so you see the images, but with annotations from the maker. So we really want to stress that aspect of the game making business, let's say, by including photographies showing how the game makers were actually centered in a very small part of Paris in the Marais, and also so those archives, and trying to track as much as possible not only the game makers but also their suppliers and their clients. So create, give you a vision of what the game making industry in the 19th century was in France, at least. So looking at games that talk about history, to go back to this narrower focus, one of the reasons why I wanted to talk about that is that those games really represent three main tendencies and three main trends in 19th century France. First of all, a rise of interest for history as a discipline and kind of democratization of history through books, and mostly illustrated books. Second of all, the development, it's not entirely new, but it's also democratizing just like a wider access, first of all, to education, and then the development of very innovative pedagogies, especially on history. I'm showing you tables that were used to remember dates, for instance, with little visual puzzles that you would reconstitute to remember dates. So those were like models that were developed in the late 18th century and used and kind of shaped also pedagogies about history and this new relationship to history as well. And the third main trend, so history one, education the second trend, and then the third trend is the rise of mass imagery, of course. So for instance, here you have images about history that were, published by Pellerin in France. They were also very cheap, kind of a precursor to comic books almost. Images that were given to children in school also. This is the third image on the right. This is a cover for a notebook, for instance. And images that were also very, very widely distributed by, as way of advertisement, and that were themselves very playful. So in this case, with the magic lantern, you could turn the picture and change the projection on the wall. And very tellingly, you have an image that's a postcard, a chromolithograph of children looking at magic lantern pictures. So you have a kind of a compendium also of mediums and formats here, and that's a very telling image about the rise of mass imagery in the 19th century. And then you get those games that condense all three trends. I really like this game, Le Petit Professeur d'Histoire, because it shows you, first of all, a game that has, at least, or claims to have, a kind of pedagogical or knowledge transmission ambition, at least. But that's also very much based on images. You can see the portraits that would be very familiar to most French people at the time through, education, but illustration in books, etc. But also through those chromolithographs you've seen earlier. And finally, this new approach to teaching with, in the place of the professor, a child who is wearing a costume. So kind of this playful relationship also to the transmission of knowledge. I was saying I'm working on mostly images of games as images, and I'm looking at their relationship of the way they circulate images. Very traditional history painting. I'm going to show you quickly a few examples because I'm seeing time run. So, taking very famous large-scale images of history and bringing them down to the scale of, domestic life, with sometimes just, very, very small images reproducing large, monumental images of national history. And sometimes also adapting them very freely. For instance, in this Histoire de France Jeu Magnétique, the picture has been transformed from Le Comte Eudes, so a Norman medieval battle, to Louis IX in front of in Tunisia. So with the artist changed the costumes and kind of manipulated the images. They're very free to do that. Circulation also exists within the production of games. Here you see Lotto plates that are reused by the maker as a jigsaw puzzle. Very probably because it was a very pragmatic choice, because the stones were very expensive, so you had to reuse them and maximize their use. And for instance, this game was produced as a Lotto game, as a jigsaw puzzle game, and as cubes as well. So really maximum use. One of the things also I consider is the new relationship to history and the new definition of history that's enacted through those games. And you see those images that are very sometimes very presentist. They talk about very recent history. Here you have a game about the Dreyfus affair, or games about various mob events, or very recent events. And in this case, what's recirculated are press images. So in this game, Jeu des manifestants, you see a crowd of students who've been demonstrating in the streets of Paris, and kind of a very violent confrontation with the police. And that's directly taken from Le Petit Journal, which was a very sensationalist journal at the time. One other thing I'm interested in is the way those images are very different also from the images of that you could find in the press or in a museum, because they also engage the players. In this case, for instance, the Jeu des manifestants, you are a solitary player. It's more like a puzzle, and you have to align or try not to align the red stars, because you're playing the police and the red stars are the demonstrators. So you're engaged also very you're forced to assume a very political position immediately. And as I was saying, one of the greatest questions about, around those manipulations of historical facts is also the idea that playing is a little bit incompatible with teaching history, because maybe you reenact history in a way, but if you put those stories and those images in the hands of children, you know what's going to happen. They're going to mess up or mess it up, and they're going to play and reshuffle history. And I think this image of dominoes, historical dominoes, and this kind of zigzaggy image of history is very telling about also the risk that there is about putting history into play. And one of the things that I noticed is that very often the games are accompanied by very thick booklets that tell the story properly and kind of try to control the discourses about history. And so you see here, there's like a real tension between the fun and education in a way. Same thing here. You have a jigsaw puzzle with the shapes of the puzzle actually were all identical. So it would have been very easy for children to move the kings around and kind of play with the narrative of history. So yeah, I think I'm going to stop here on this paradox between playing and history. And as I was saying, I would really welcome your remarks and questions. Thank you.